as a coach, I used to say to players all the time, four things are going to happen when we play. Four things are going to happen. We're going to play well and win. We're going to play well and lose. We're going to play poor and win sometimes. And we're going to play poor and lose. So, let's focus on what we can do and let's try to play well every night. That's not always going to mean we're going to win. But it also doesn't mean we're always going to lose when we play poor. Because sometimes we're going to beat teams that we're better than, even though we didn't play poorly. The process is trying to get better every night. The process is stepping back. How well did we play?
Welcome to the JAMODI podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is JAMODI, just a matter of doing it.
Today we're joined by former high school basketball coach Jon Youngblood. Coach Youngblood coached for 33 years, 28 seasons as a head coach with over 500 wins. He spent time at Kilgore, Newman Smith, South Lake Carroll, and Frisco Reedy High School. Coach Youngblood led his teams to 9 district championships, 16 state playoff appearances, 3 regional tournaments, and 1 state tournament runner-up. He was named District Coach of the Year 9 times. Coach Youngblood has been a clinic speaker for THSCA and TABC. He's the founder of Team Marite Basketball, established in 2009 as the premier host of high school previews. Before we hear from Coach, take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media at JAMODI Podcast.
Coaches, the JAMODI podcast is powered by Scoreboard Media. Scoreboard Media works with high schools across the country to run professional sponsorship programs on their LED scoreboards. Whether you already have LED and you just want to supercharge the revenue, or you want to use sponsorship revenue to buy new LED video scoreboards, Scoreboard Media can help. They work with sponsors and advertisers locally, regionally, and nationally who want to connect with your school's community. Email info@scoreboardmedia.com to start the conversation and see what's possible. Well, I want to thank you so much for coming on here, giving up your time. It's always been fun over the years when our paths cross, and you're just somebody that I've always respected as a coach, and I know so many other coaches feel the same way. So really appreciate this.
Yeah, not a problem. Happy to do it.
Yeah, I just want to first start off with one of my favorite questions about the characteristics of a great coach. And if you could narrow it down to a few, what are some things that all great coaches have or possess? I'd love to hear that from you.
Well, that's a good question. Most of the ones that I have been around that are really, really successful, are kind of, I almost want to say on the spectrum. We're almost compulsive to an extent that we're driven,
Obsessed.
Obsessed with the sport, probably in some ways to a detriment to ourselves. But the ones that I've been around have been, guys and girls that are, they understand what they want their team to be. And they're really good at painting that picture to their players and their staff. And, you could walk in the gym and in the first 10 minutes of their practice, you know exactly what their program's about and what they're going to do and those kind of things. So I think, you've got to be a great salesman. I really honestly don't believe that, X defense is better than X, Y defense, or this offense better than that offense. I think it really comes down to being a salesman and selling your team and your players. Like in your case, you've sold your guys on the fact that our best way to win is shoot the ball. I don't know if you remember Coach Capella, but Coach Capella used to say, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, but shoot the damn ball all the time. We shoot the damn ball. And his kids just lived that. And, if you watched his teams compete, you knew that's what they were going to be about. And I think that's what great coaches, do a really good job of.
I love that list. Starting off with the compulsive, or a lot of coaches have used that obsessed idea. And I do think there is a part of this where you should be thinking about your team, thinking about the season, thinking about learning and growing, I feel like you should be thinking about that quite a bit. But to your point, there's a line. There's a line that we have to almost draw for ourselves where basketball stays where it should be, which is a high priority, something we care about, but not the only thing we care about. Because I think that's where you see the relationship rates in coaching, aren't necessarily the best, with it, how those spouses surviving the whole way. And early on in my marriage with Jana, when I first got the job at Faith, I had the idea of, Jana, I love the game. I'm pretty obsessed about it. Just so you know, in season, I'm just going to be gone. I'm going to be up working. I'm going to do this. I wanted to kind of prepare for it. And she drew the line real early on in our relationship of, I'm not going to be second. I need you to do that. I need you to put me first. And it is something I think we all have to remember, not to have our identity completely wrapped up in this thing.
Yeah, I think it's an important part to also not only us, but our players, because so many of them are wrapped up in, their identity is how well they perform.
Yeah.
And getting those players to understand that, that's what they do. That's not who they are. Mm-hmm. So if they play poor tonight, that doesn't make them a bad person or a bad, kid. It just means tonight you didn't reach whatever goal you had tonight. Let's go back and work on it the next day. Same thing with coaches. We put so much emphasis in winning. I was one of the worst. And I think winning is a very, very important part of this puzzle because, they're keeping score for a reason. But at the same time, that can't be our only goal. We've got to be doing this for more than just wins and losses. We've got to have, goals of, in my case, because I was always with guys, molding young men and teaching young men how to reach goals and how to get along and how to set goals. So many things that, in the 33 years that I did this, that when those players come back and tell you, man, that coach, I didn't necessarily believe it back then, but, a lot of those things I use every day, whether it be some kind of saying that you said, all of us have certain sayings that we say, and, they kind of resonate with players when things aren't going well in their life. Maybe they can reach back and say, yeah, I remember coach saying, whatever the saying may be.
Those are those coaching paychecks that we get after guys have graduated, whether they were awesome when they were completely bought in when we had them, or they were kicking and screaming and fighting the culture and what we were selling. Like you said, being good, having a vision and selling that vision for your playing style, for the way you want the locker room, for the culture, everything. But when they do come back, or they do send you that text 4 or 5 years later of like, coach, I get it. Or they start having kids themselves or get into coaching themselves, and they say, golly, I don't know how you did it. And those are those sweet moments there.
Yeah, it's mostly the ones that were kicking and screaming the whole time you were coaching them. You know what I mean? They're the ones that come back and have that kind of conversation with you.
We want to make sure that our players care about this sport an appropriate amount. And I think sometimes we are so into it, obsessed. It's our job. It's how we provide for our family, that we end up putting that kind of pressure on our players. And the reminder for me always is that it's our job. It's their game. And if it's just a game for them, then we need them to care about it like it's a game, not life and death. I don't really go into the whole battle or war scenes with my team. Like, hey, this is a war. Like, we're in a battle. We're this or that. I don't think so. I think there are wars and battles out there. And I understand, obviously, what coaches mean when they use that. But the game is fun. We're going to go out and compete and fight. But even when I say fight, Okay, are we really going to fight? Are we going to trade blows? I hope not. But I think the words that we use right there, even then, it makes this something bigger or more than it really is. We want to be our very, very best. We want to compete because we've been practicing. But that's just me. I think the words we choose to use in those situations can maybe add to the pressure that our players feel. And we're trying to do the right thing. Battle, tough, men, fight, all this stuff, but it's basketball.
Right, right. And we all have stories that we can tell where we didn't do a good job as leaders and mentors, that behavior. And, we have, the good ones come back and apologize and say, hey, look, man, I lost my composure or whatever it may be after the game or after that situation. So,
yeah,
you're 100% right.
I think you nailed it with the clarity part. What do your teams hang their hat on? When they show up to work out every day, do they know ultimately what you're trying to achieve? And I think the coaches that I've talked to, that the moment you ask them about what their program is or style or whatever, when they have that clear vision, there's probably a really good chance that they're able to convey that to their players. The team, after you play a team and you really have no clue what they were trying to achieve or what they are trying to do, and maybe it's just that kind of a year, or it's a clarity issue, whether it's shooting a lot of threes, whether it's hanging your hat on the defensive end, junking the game up by playing a lot of different things and changing all the time. Coach, I think that clarity piece is really important. How do you grow that as a coach? How do you make sure you're not missing that?
Well, I'll just use my example of my coaching experience. I went from a place at Newman Smith where, you were at the colony. So my first year at Newman Smith, was Bracy and Darren and Bam and those guys senior year. So we're playing Tommy and his crew at the colony in the old gym, with the terrible sound system.
Yeah.
And we're up at halftime. We got no business because we're not very good that year. We're up 2. And next thing I know, we come out in the second half and they've hung 100 on us, and just exploded. But my point is, at Newman Smith, we were known for guarding people and pressuring the ball. Well, I go to South Lake Carroll, it's a different kid, it's a different environment, different everything. So, we're more in the ideal of we're gonna do something. I think as a coach, you have to decide whether you want to try to be better at what you do than everybody else, or you're going to do something different than everybody else. And we decided our best bet was to do something different. So we played a lot of matchup zone, and then we ran, Princeton offense on the offensive side. So when you played us, you're working on things that you normally are not working on. You know what I mean? And B, you probably didn't see. It's kind of like the football coach now that doesn't want to go against the veer because they never see it, and they're not going to see it again. So why would we play these guys? So, that's kind of our mentality. Our players, I mean, you can kind of ask them. They literally, when somebody would open the game out playing this man, they would kind of light out, hey, we're fixing a layup, fixing a layup. They had that much confidence in it, what we were doing. So I think you have to sell it to them. As I moved on, I quit talking about the offense in terms of it's the Princeton offense. We just made it our offense and never used the term Princeton because Princeton, for whatever reason, has a negative connotation when you say it out to the public and you say it out to maybe some parents, you know what I mean? Is they think slow down. We didn't play slow down. We shot a lot of threes and, shot layups, basically is what we did. And so we quit using that terminology and just use different terminology, our motion offense or whatever it is, because you and I both know that 99% of the parents don't know what it is anyway. But if they hear Princeton, they think, oh, somebody said that, slow down, whatever,
Yeah.
Whatever it may be.
You're leaving it up to chance at that point, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like, I know it's a different topic, but I remember I was one of the first guys that started utilizing Twitter, to promote things. And everybody's like, well, why are you doing that? And I'm like, man, I'm trying to sell my story. Instead of letting somebody else tell my story, I want to tell my story. I want to tell our story about what we're doing, what's happening, instead of hoping that the right story gets out. You know what I mean? So I think a lot of that stuff is important, especially today. I mean, more so today than ever. If you're not promoting your kids and your program and those kind of things, somebody's probably doing the opposite. If you're not. So I think it's important to promote your program. I think you got to sell what you do, whether it's the best offense or best defense. Your kids got to think it's the best offense and the best defense. I used to give Danny Henderson a hard time. Danny and I, long story, and I apologize for getting into stories, but I'm an old man.
I love
it. Danny, first time I met Danny, it was around the mid-'90s. I took the head job I took the head job in the early 90s at Little River Academy. And so I take the job, and we immediately get put in the district with Danny Anderson and Liberty Hill. They're just coming off the state tournament appearance. And so we got put in a 9-team district, right? And, if you've ever been in that, back then we did a zone, a north and a south zone. And we played each other. We were both in the north. And Danny beat us 109 to 107 the first round.
Wow.
Right? I got a guy go for 49. He has a guy go for 47. I'm sure it was great to watch, but I hated every moment of it. And then he comes back to our place and beats us like 101 to 96 or whatever. So he beats us both times. Then we have a little tournament at the end. We play the runner-up in the south, and he plays we play the winner in the south. He plays the runner-up in the south. We both win, so we play again. Back then, only 2 win for the district championship, and we beat them at Temple Junior College like 97 to 90. I think we caught them on an off night. But my point is, back then Danny was running up, down, shooting threes, pressing, doing all the Loyola stuff. Then fast forward, 15 years, he's the head coach at Marcus. I'm the head coach at South Lake Carroll, and our final score is 40 to 38. What was different? Different times, different philosophies, different everything. Was Danny great doing that? 100%. He had his kids as sold on that stuff as I've ever seen. But in the same breath, he had his players sold at Marcus that we were going to win and we were going to be special, guarding every possession and making it a grind. And they were, So I think as a coach, you've got to make a decision on how you want to play, and not just, I hate to say it, but we've got so many young coaches now that want to play this way because that's what somebody's doing on TV. And a lot of times that's not going to put your team in the best position to be successful. You've done this long enough to know that it's not always that team in your district that won the district championship that the coaching staff did the best job. And many times it's that coach that went 500 that probably should have won 2 games in the district. And coached his butt off and got his team to 500 because his kids believed in what they were trying to do. They were all bought in. It just, as a coach, I used to say to players all the time, 4 things are going to happen when we play. 4 things are going to happen. We're going to play well and win. We're going to play well and lose. We're going to play poor and win sometimes. And we're going to play poor and lose. So, let's focus on what we can do and let's try to play well every night. That's not always going to mean we're going to win. But it also doesn't mean we're always going to lose when we play poor. Sometimes we're going to beat teams that we're better than, even though we didn't play poorly. The process is trying to get better every night. The process is stepping back. How well did we play? Did we play well? Let's don't focus on the result. Focus on that process. Did we play well? Did we get a good shot? So much with kids, they focus on the result. And when you step back and you show them the stats, hey, look, we just took 10 open quality shots with graded shots, and they just didn't fall. You know what I mean? That wasn't because we were playing poor or we weren't doing things well. The ball just didn't go in. You know what I mean? Sometimes that happens. Same thing on defense. Sometimes you play a great possession of defense, and they throw something up and it goes in, and you look at your assistant and you're like, oh, what am I going to do? That's just the way the ball bounces sometimes. But I think when you focus as a coach on those things that you can control, and focus on the process, everything else takes care of itself. I mean, I know that's cliche, but the more that I can get that across to coaches, the better.
Coach, that's 5 minutes or so of just absolute gold, in my opinion. So many great things in there. And I love the stories. The more stories, Coach, that you have throughout your experiences, like, don't hold back on those. And because there's so much that we can learn from that. And one is, I thought about conviction. How does a guy like Danny Henderson sell his team on playing this way and getting up and down, but then have the ability a decade or so later to sell his team on something completely different? He has to believe in it, and they have to feed off of that belief. Like, I'm unfortunately, Coach, I believe I'm just a one-trick pony. There's only one way that I know how to play or know how to coach how to play. And there's probably been times here at Faith where doing something different might have been the smarter thing to do. Or like you said early on, better in our district or different. Well, if there are some other dudes in our district over the years that, like some of those Lubbock teams, they just early on here, Lubbock Trinity, they were so fast, Coach. I thought we got up and down and ran, and they just smashed us. So we definitely weren't different, and we definitely weren't better. And that's a tough combination right there. But to be like you, to be like Danny, to those coaches that doesn't matter what style, I can learn it, and then I can teach it, and I can help them to believe in it because I believe this is the best for our team. I think that's really unique.
Yeah, and don't forget, Danny had a phase there at Peaster where he was a 131 guy too. So, he's gone through several retools and he's won everywhere. So, I mean, I guess my point with that is we got so many coaches that marry themselves to one style of play and they never change no matter what they have walk in the gym. And, I've done that too. Don't get me wrong. I'm guilty of that too.
The Kenny Hoffpowers are out there for sure.
Yeah. I mean, but my argument would be, you do play different. What Faith does is different to a certain extent. Not everybody plays that style. Not everybody gets up and down, shoots a lot of threes, and believes in that, and believes in those statistics and how that comes out. So I think that is different.
I think the ability to sell it to your team, whether it's a individual skill work. I like to do some things that probably a lot of coaches, if they walked in the gym, like today, Coach, we had a cone on the elbow. So you might even like glaze over or just give me a disapproving look here, depending on how you believe. We had a cone on the elbow. We're facing away from our basket. We get in a drop or a split, and our inside hand grabs the cone. We push it on the curve up to the top of the key. When they get to the top of the key, they toss the cone in the air. They're going to turn their hips, get in a drop, go split through, and grab the cone with this hand, and then go finish. I have to explain that to them of what is the game behind this? Why are we doing this? Because if I don't, then it is just a gimmick. It is just something that looks cool or could be fun. I have to have a game connector in that. But the whole thing is it doesn't matter. Oh man, this is cliche because it's the whole idea with the podcast. It doesn't matter what you do. It's how you do what you do. Can you explain it? Can you connect the game to your players, and can you help them to believe in it as much as you do? And coach, is it a gift or is it something that can be learned over time?
I think it's both. I think some guys have that gift, and they just naturally are able to get in front of kids and translate what needs to be done in no other way I can explain other than they just got a gift. They're that kid magnet sometimes that can do it. And then you got other guys that can gradually learn. What I would encourage coaches that are watching this is that there's a lot of guys like me out there that love the game and like being around the game, and reach out to those mentors and invite them to come watch your practice. There's a lot of guys, and I'm not talking to me necessarily, but there's a lot of guys out there that would love to come sit and watch your practice and give you, now, you might not want it, but give you critical feedback on what they see.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because a lot of us talk about what we're doing, but you and I both know that it's not what you say, it's what you emphasize. And, are you emphasizing, you say you want to play this way. Is that an emphasis of practice? Is that what you're working on in practice? I hear coaches talk all the time about communication and those kind of things. I should be able, if that's one of your emphases, I should be able to tell immediately when I walk in your gym. Are your kids echoing calls? Are they, how are they coaching each other? How are they working from drill to drill? Are they working to get each other drill to drill? Those kind of things. So I think what's emphasized in practice is much, much more important than necessarily, I would even go as far as sometimes what we're actually teaching in practice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think what's missing right now in the puzzle piece is I think we've, as coaches, because of the current environment that we live in, we allow players to hold us hostage. And I think we have to take a step back and remember that we have what they want. It's not the opposite. We have what they want. They want to play basketball. And we need to use that tool, and I think it is a tool, to get what we want out of them. So in other words, most of them, if you don't allow them to hold you hostage, are not going to allow you to hold hostage. I talk to coaches and, they tell me, well, this guy won't do this, this guy won't do that. And I'm like, why is that an option? I mean, don't you control playing time? I mean, it's not that difficult. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah,
we've all had players that we've had to bench and, make a point. And some of them learned from it and some of them didn't. And my argument is if they didn't, they're a cancer, and it's probably addition through subtraction.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What I see a lot of coaches doing right now is, I don't want to coach that kid too hard because I'm afraid he's going to leave. I don't want to do this too hard because, this kid's got so-and-so and so-and-so trying to get him to come here. I get that. I understand that. But if your ultimate goal is to develop a team, that team better be together. And that team and those teammates know if this guy's holding you hostage. They know that.
Yeah. I think I want to go back 1 second, because after I kind of gave that example of the cone and stuff, and then I asked the question, I really don't want, I think it came across as I was saying I have the gift, and how do other guys, or can they? And I didn't mean that at all if it did come off that way. And in fact, I think there are plenty of times where if it's a new drill, a new quick hitter that we're putting in, I don't feel that confident in it. And I think that resonates with my players. I think they can tell that I'm a little uneasy, and I can't remember what coach it was. He said, anytime that you're going to teach something to your players, don't screw it up. Like, you got to teach it right. But part of that teaching it right is feeling confident in it and knowing it. And I don't feel like I have that down or anything. So that was just one thing. But going back to what you just said, I think you're right on the money with the fear that I've felt and coaches feel sometimes with holding certain players accountable because, and you talk about the climate, it is just so simple for people to leave and move. And you know that it is important to have talent, no doubt. Like it helps when you have talent. And then even if you're trying to develop everybody, but I do think there has to be a line or it has to be this idea, a confidence inside of us that says, here are our standards. I'm going to hold you accountable for that, knowing full well that I might lose somebody, that I might lose a player, and being okay with that. Easier said than done, Coach.
Yeah, 100%. I think, the ultimate sign of love is when we hold someone accountable. And I think that's a hard concept for coaches, some coaches, to understand that me holding you to a high standard is the ultimate sign of me loving you, is because I believe that you can achieve that. And I'm not going to let you, you know, get by with just bare minimums.
Yep.
I'm going to hold you to that standard. And I think when players see that you'll do that for your best player,
yeah,
and you'll do it for the kid that's 15th on your bench. You know what I mean? Because we've all been guilty of the other. We ignore those kids, but they play an important role in that whole development of the team. You know, as well as people like your support staff, your managers, and those kind of things. When they see me treat those kids with the ultimate respect, they understand, hey, I better do the same.
Yeah.
As opposed to, I treating them like dogs, and what are they going to do? They're going to do the same thing. So I think as a leader and a mentor of players and coaches and even assistant coaches, I'm as guilty as anybody that, I get frustrated and I sometimes, would put my anger out on an assistant coach. Not because that guy did something bad. It's just that I'm angry and I'm looking for an outlet, and I don't want to necessarily display it to the kids. So I think as leaders, we've got to be able to own that, make sure we're focusing in the right direction, make sure that if things aren't going well, we make sure that we're the ultimate person responsible. You know what I mean? I can't tell you how many times I've walked in after the game and apologized to kids. Hey, look, we didn't play well tonight. I'm responsible for that. I didn't prepare us well. I didn't do that. And I think if kids really believe that, you know what I mean? Hey, coach, he feels like he's partly responsible. Instead of the opposite, which happens. And I did it a lot as a young coach, if you guys would have done this, you guys would have done that. You know what I mean? Well, what did you just accomplish? You just beat them down.
Yep.
They feel like you don't believe in them anymore. And all of a sudden now, any trust that you had built throughout that season, you've lost. So, I think a lot of times you just got to step back and say, hey, it's on me tonight. It won't happen again. This is what we're going to do. And I think as coaches, we gotta also talk less after losses. You know what I mean? Just bite your tongue after a loss. And, hey, we'll go back to work tomorrow. We played well. We just didn't come out on the right side of the scoreboard. Let's go back to work tomorrow. Love you. Let's go. Bam. And quit going into the tirades about all the things that we could have done better, because you and I both know at that moment they're not listening anyway.
No. We're rarely at our best in those moments.
And the only person we're trying to make happy at that point is ourselves.
That's right.
And let's just wait and let's have that conversation tomorrow at practice or whenever it may be, I think is a lot better tactic to go with.
Coach, you did it again. You wove in like 4 or 5 great concepts right there, and I'm not smart enough to follow them all, even with my note taking here, because I still have some notes from the last part that you said. But completely agree with what. No, completely
that's
agree.
Probably
with
me just jumping around everywhere.
No, but it's good.
Else.
No, there's a good coach. There's a good flow to everything you're saying. It's just like it's stuff that I feel like you only get from experience, because. Yeah. This is year 18 for me. 17 years ago, I wasn't thinking about any of the stuff that you've just talked about.
No,
and it just, you lose. You have players that you feel like you just didn't connect with, teams that you feel like you've let down over the years. That extreme ownership part's really important. I feel like we got to turn anything bad that happens. It's our fault, and when you start to look at it that way, then you can position. Okay, if it's my fault, what can I do as the one in charge to help this? Typically, getting them on the line, I don't know how much that, besides just making them pissed off even more, I don't know if that fixes problems. And I'm not talking about attitude and effort. You have an attitude and you have an effort problem, you got to rewind the clock 3 to 4 months when you started in the culture that you set out. Not to say that there won't be little moments, but hopefully you have those systems in place that you can right that ship real fast with a player or with a team. But I think there's 2 things that I've borrowed from other people that have really changed the way that I coach. The one is having a really good shot selection scale. Shot selection is the most personal thing to every player. And as a program that does value shooting 30 to 40, sometimes 50 threes in a game, shot selection becomes really, really important. Or else you got little Timmy jacking shots from half court just like anybody else. And that's not what we do. So that was one. But the second one, Coach, is you nailed it. I've eliminated halftime. Well, halftime talks to a point, but I've eliminated post-game speeches. I just don't do them anymore. And except for the last game of the year, we lost a playoff game here last year. We took them in the locker room. We cried. We talked. We hugged. We prayed. That's different. But here's what I mean. It doesn't matter if we're on the road. Doesn't matter if it's a win or a loss. After the game, if it's at home, we'll meet at half court in a little circle, not a big drawn out one, a little circle. I loved watching you play. I get that done. I asked for celebrations from the group, even after a loss. Ask the guys, hey, what'd you see? What did you appreciate? What celebrations do you have? And they start pointing out things. Man, Johnny really was playing hard tonight. Brian really was shooting with courage. And they start to say some things that change my mind instantly about maybe what I thought, which is we sucked. Like we were awful. What are we doing here? That's in my mind. They changed that because of what they saw. And it makes me think even more about those things. And then here's what tomorrow brings. We pray, and then they get to go home. Their parents are right there. They get to go eat pizza. And I didn't say anything damaging because I was resulting in that moment over things I thought that I saw. But if I actually watch film, are different anyway. I don't know how many relationships that I have kept or parent meetings that I've avoided just because I have done away with post-game speeches. And it's probably been 2 or 3 years now since I've done any of those.
Yeah, I wish I would have taken that advice early in my career.
Yeah.
Because we're so hardwired to be all about winning. And
we want to fix it. We want to fix it. We want to show them that we lost, but I got this, guys. Like I know the answers. And yeah,
right. And too many times that's just a fragile time to have that conversation because their confidence is not high anyway right now because they just got beat. I think you as a coach, if you just take a step back after that game and say whatever you got to say, try to make it positive, quick, short, and get out of there. And then let's go back to work tomorrow. I don't know if you know Stan Leach, but Stan, I'm sure you do. JAMODI, that's where I learned JAMODI from, was Stan. Yes. But Stan would always say, stay up, stay together. mean, that was his saying, you know what I mean? And, you know, one of the most positive guys I've ever been around. He and I did TABC camps together for several summers. So, you know, I was so lucky in that in my development, I had folks that mentored me in the right way, in the right direction, you know, that were such good coaches and good people that I always felt that if I didn't do a good job, I'd be letting those folks down.
Yeah.
You know, I got involved real early with Chris Bales, was my student teacher. I don't know if you know Chris, but Chris was a long-time successful basketball coach, very influential in TABC and TABC camps. Got me involved in camps right after I graduated from college. So I started with the camps, you know, was lucky enough to be the camp director for 6 years. So I was heavily involved in that. You know, but even more than that, that summer, every summer, being able to, as coaches, to network and hear all the different ways that people were playing and being successful and what they did and what worked for you and what's working for you and those kind of things. I think some of that's lost now because we're doing, and this is great what you're doing, but we've lost some of that in person. Yeah. Let me go watch practice. Let me get in a clinic and be able to ask questions exactly how you teach that. Because you and I have both been to these things where you go listen to I hate to say it, but a lot of times you go listen to a college coach and they talk about, we do X, 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 and then you go watch them practice and you're like, that's not what you do. You know what I mean? Yeah. But we've had the opposite of that too, where we may have thought, hey, not a whole lot of positive, but then we go watch practice. Like, wow, whoa, that was impressive. And it's not always the big name guys, as you know. Yeah. That you learn the most from and you take the most from. I mean, I've had guys that I walked out of the gym when we started trying to learn the Princeton stuff. You know, the Princeton folks don't share. I don't know if you know that, but they're not big sharers. You know, you go to the true Princeton folks. So when we started, we wanted to do it our first year at Southlake, and we inherited. I was the third coach in a year, and so you know those poor seniors, you know, they weren't buying what we were selling, and it wasn't their fault. You know what I mean? So we kind of just put it off. We didn't make wholesale changes. Kind of did some of the things they'd done before and tried to get better at it. And then year two, we went full-fledged into it. And when we really started looking at it, everybody at that time told us, you need to go up around Denver. Because at that time, Jeff Bedzelic was just gone from Arizona to Colorado and took it with him. Even though he's not a Princeton guy, he took the Air Force job and they ran the Princeton stuff. And he was like, I would be stupid to not do what they've done. And so we went and watched Colorado practice for a few days and went and watched University of Denver practice, went and watched Air Force practice while we were there. And you know, we thought we were getting a really good grasp of everything. And then we go watch Joe Scott practice on a Saturday morning and we're like, oh, wow. This is like crazy complicated. Yeah. But, you know, it was such a great experience because one campus, they gave us everything. Coach, we just, you know, like, I'll give you an example. Bedzelic and his staff, they just started at University of Colorado. They said, Coach, we just installed it this year. You can have all our practice tapes from the install on. I mean, what a great opportunity to learn when you're trying to learn the offense. So that was what we got most of our information from. And then, you know, as a coach, you kind of tinker and change and fit what you got and make it your own personal, you know, make the different things that you want to do. You know, we did a little different at Southlake than we did when I went to Reedy. You know, it was a different kid because in Southlake, we pretty much had our kids all the time. And at Reedy, I was counting on a few football kids every year. So, you know, I don't want to say dumb it down, but I had to, we couldn't go as deep. Yeah, we couldn't go as deep. But we were still really good at it. So it really as a coach, I think we miss some of those things that are not happening anymore. COVID was great, but it also meant that now everybody thinks they can get everything from watching a video.
Yeah.
And you and I both know that we can't. We've got to be in person. We've got to be there in the environment and be able to ask questions, watch practice. Why did you do this, coach? What was important, and why aren't you doing this instead of that? Those kind of questions that you can't ask on a video.
Yep.
I think are important.
I think that's a great reminder, and you're right on the money. It is different. It's even different in post-COVID, but I think that was happening a little bit even pre, where like when I first started with Wes Watson at McKinney High School, we would go places. Guys would come to the gym. We would go down to the state tournament together, and it was just anti-ABC and all those things. And I think as technology has moved along, and you feel like you can't just watch it. But like I remember getting the packet from Calipari's Memphis drive motion, dribble drive.
I think I got the same package.
Yeah, and it's like I thought this thing's gold, and well now I can just watch 100 videos on it, from my house, but that's something that I think I need to do a better job of, especially with the high schools that are right around me, or the even in the Dallas Fort Worth area, is make an effort to go to those practices. And now, if they'll have me, one of the motivations for doing this is I've always thought of myself as a public school coach. I was a public school player, and at McKinney, never thought about the private schools. In fact, when we were in a tournament with Preston, would I go,
Yeah.
That's just how I felt. And sorry, Jeff Clarkson. And and when I came here, man, I felt that change real quick of the community. The private school coaching community just isn't the same. Some are part-time. There's a lot of changing in it, and not that the guys aren't nice guys or trying to do their very, very best, but then I kind of felt like on this little bit of an island. And then COVID hit, and I got to talk with coaches a little bit over Zoom, and found a way of, okay, not only can I connect with more people, have them share their stuff, learn from them, but I can also be all across Texas or far away. But my inward motivation too is connection, like wanting those relationships to be able to bounce things off and root for each other too, because I think you felt this way. I mean, you talk about Tommy, like Coach Thomas, he was just so relational. Like there's not a person out there really from the 90s and 2000s that doesn't have a Tommy Thomas story, or at least look at him fondly. I mean, maybe him and Chastain, I don't know if they're still good or not, or they're still, but it was like, we need to get back to that, where we're not hiding stuff, where we are open to share. Anybody can come to Grapevine Faith Christian School and see my nice boys that are running around and trying to run and gun and play. Anybody can do that, but I need to go out too and have those conversations at TABC. Don't just stay with your staff. Talk to the people around you and make those connections.
I think we've lost. I really do think we've lost that. We've lost, and I don't blame anybody. I'm not saying. I think it's just a process.
But I miss the old way, Coach. I miss that.
Yeah, we were lucky. I remember the first year I went to coaching school. The first year, believe it or not, it was in Dallas, and I came up and I was with Coach Bells, and we drove over to one of the Dallas community colleges. Can't remember which campus it was now. And during coaching school, because back then there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity at the Texas High School Coaches Association clinics. They'd have a few, and had a thing there. I mean, who are the Thunder Ducks? Can't remember which schools the Thunder Ducks. It was that campus. Anyway,
I'm trying to think of it. Yeah.
Anyway, we went there, and there's 40.
Is it Ranger?
There.
No,
it was in North Dallas. I can't remember which campus it was. There are 30 or 40 of us there, And I remember, it was the Tony Maldens. I don't know if you remember Coach Malden.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yep.
know, the legends, at least to me, in the game up there talking in front of us. And I was just like in awe, man. I was just like, this is amazing, man. I get to listen to these guys talk. And I think we're missing that, that knowledge that they were able to pass down to us, not just X's and O's, but, things that work, things that were successful, that inexpensive learning that they've already done for us that they can share with us, that we don't have to go out and mess up ourselves, that we can gain from them. I think sometimes it's missing. I think as coaches like myself, I try to do the same thing as much as I can, give back to the game. The game of basketball has been tremendous to me. I got out, people ask me, why did you get out? And I had made it a decision that when I got to the point that I didn't want to do the summer stuff, the leagues, the attending middle school games, because I was still doing it, and we started the strength and conditioning and the skills and all that. When I didn't want to do those things anymore, now I didn't say I didn't do them. I said I didn't want to do them anymore. It was time to get out because I would be cheating my players. And I had gotten that way, kind of felt that way the year before I retired. And then I'm just like, you know what? I love the game. I love coaching the game of basketball, and I love the basketball season. But I don't want to go to the middle school games anymore. You know what I mean? I don't want to do those things anymore. And me as a head basketball coach, that's part of the job, in my opinion. And if I wasn't doing those things, I felt like I was cheating our kids. Now, whether guys out there feel that same way, I don't know. I can tell you that here in Frisco, we have 12 high schools, and it was pretty rare when I went to a middle school game and saw other head coaches. You know what I mean? But I think that as a coach, I'm not saying you got to be there every middle school game, but you definitely got to be a presence. They got to know who the head coach is, where they're feeding, and if they were good players, I assure you they knew who I was, and I knew who they were. You know what I mean? We already had a conversation, but I think sometimes we're missing that link that we for whatever reason have kind of become, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but I don't know any other way to explain it, but we've become almost AAU-ish in that we just think our job is just coach our kids in the game of basketball. And our job is a lot more than just coaching the game of basketball. And if you're not doing any more than that, then you are cheating kids, in my opinion.
So many things that if we're not careful, it can steal our joy for getting to do what we do. And so maybe being organized with your day helps. Understanding the fact that there are going to be things, even with the best laid plan, there are going to be things that mess up and take your time away from it. But ultimately, I think, Coach, what you're talking about is your why. If your why is to build these relationships with your players, high school all the way down, I've had a lot of coaches come on here and talk about building relationships. It seems like the only way to really do it is to spend time. So you're spending time with the junior high. You are a part of that program. There's and it may be a little bit different too at the high school level where you've got these feeder schools, or public school level. You got some feeders where you don't know, like in McKinney, we didn't know where all our kids were coming from. We weren't sure who's going where, and we had some schools that were split, and so there was this feeling of like, why even do that? We don't even know what these kids. But ultimately, like, we're here to help them grow, not just on the floor but off. And I think you got to check your why a little bit. And I really appreciate your honesty, vulnerability with what made you make a change. And I get that completely.
Yep. 33 years is enough. It's a young man's game.
How many years again? Will you say that again?
33.
Yeah.
33. Yeah, I was a head coach for 28 of those 33. So
That's an
did a
amazing
little bit,
career.
did a little bit of everything. Was assistant principal, did some assistant AD stuff, did a little bit of everything. So got to go the full gamut of education.
Coach, I'm going to go travel back in time to something you said earlier in our talk that I just thought was so good. And I wrote it down. I wanted to make a point or talk more about it was how you talked about the Princeton offense, the stigma that is out there about it. But even, I mean, you can take a lot of offenses and use them in different ways and speed things up, slow things down. So yeah, but that is what people will automatically think. And instead of calling it that, it's our offense. And when we talked about clarity, a big part of that is identity, them knowing what they're about, knowing what your program is about. And I think as much as we're borrowing things from other people, we have to quickly make it our own. So our offense here at our 5-out dribble drive motion here at Faith, we don't call Doug Novak's motion or Mark Cassio's motion. We call it flow. It's our
Yeah,
flow. When leather touches our fingertips, fellas, we're flowing. And that guys don't need to know all the ins and outs of my influences and where I got
right.
this terminology from. This is who we are and this is how we play. This is what we do. But then the ability to, if parents want, if they come to practice, like even in a parent meeting, I don't get too much into X's and O's because know your audience. Like, do they really need to know all those things? Now, if you have a family come, they're interested, if you're a private school, interested in the school, or maybe it's your first year there and you want to talk a little bit about the vision of what it's going to look like. Sure. But to your point, make it yours. And I think that was such a great point.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I learned that the hard way. That was some of that inexpensive learning. Because when we started all that at Southlake, we talked about Princeton a lot. We did this and that, and it sometimes would be used against us, like as a negative connotation. Um, not only with maybe a parent or whatever, but even a fan. That kind of stuff is just. So we learned real quick that we're gonna not use that term and just make it our offense. Give it different names. Basically, it was the same thing. And as you and I both know, most of the people in the crowd don't know any different anyway. You could tell them that you're playing man and be in a 2-3 zone, and they wouldn't know the difference. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
mean, we've all seen even announcers say, "Yeah, they're coming out in a 2-3 zone." You watch for 5 seconds, no, they're playing man. You know what I mean? Just be,
Even at the higher
yeah,
levels, you hear that sometimes. And
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And I got news for you. We played some games. At Southlake, we ran a lot of Mike Green's matchup zone, which was complicated. It was if you remember Jody Bass, Jody used to run some of it, so that's who I got it from. And it was it was more complicated probably than it needed to be,
yeah,
but it also we could really play games with people. I mean, you could all right, this possession we're gonna play on the first pass. We're gonna go man. You know what I mean? Or if it goes to the left, we're gonna go
golly,
zone. All these different things.
was
Uh,
the best recipe against it not just playing fast and beating them down and shooting before they set it or you set it up. That's a good idea. But also, was it just running your man stuff at the end of the day, no matter what? Was that a good
yeah,
idea against it?
yeah, probably running something that what our rule was, and I'm not coaching anymore, so I don't mind
Yeah.
giving out what our secrets were. But our secret was we always sat in a 2-3 zone. That's what we started in, and we would stay straight 2-3 until you scored 3 consecutive trips on us. And if you scored 3 consecutive trips on us, next possession we're going to go maybe 5-1, which meant we were in 2-3 zone on the first pass. We went man. You know what I mean? All of a sudden, you're playing maybe a team that's got superior athletes in you, and they're wasting 2 timeouts because coach is yelling man, and the kids are all, no, coach, they're going. You know what I mean? And all of a sudden, instead of playing instinctual, we're playing their thinking, and which is what we're trying to make them do. I don't know if you remember Henry Thomas when he was at Louisville. Henry used to, and I'm really good friends with Henry, so I don't mind sharing this. Henry would say, I hate playing you. I absolutely hate playing you.
What a great compliment there.
I said, that's the plan, my man. That is the plan. We do not want anybody to want to play us. But when we went to Reedy, we knew we couldn't be as complicated defensively because I didn't have the kids in the gym. So we went a little bit more to a point zone type thing, which was a little easier to teach.
Scarborough.
Yeah, and that's, him and Eric Littleton and, all those guys, the Dean Smith point zone is really where it came from. But it was a lot more simple to teach, a lot easier to take a kid straight off the football field and throw him in the middle of that zone and say, hey, stay between the basket and the goal. That's really all they had to do. And, just teach some real basic principles. And I'll be honest with you, I was at Reedy for 5 years. I know we got beat. Don't get me wrong. We obviously weren't a powerhouse, but I don't know if anybody really ever figured it out. You know what I mean? How to attack it. Some were better than others, but really, truly, it's amazing what different things different people did. And a lot of times what they did was not, it was like, oh, great, they're going to use the ball screen on it. And, we just switch all that. It's pretty simple. But there were some that would figure out, some weaknesses. And I can remember distinctly a couple of games where, as a coaching staff, I'd look at my assistant and say, oh, crap, they've solved this, where they rotated us and got my little 2-man that's 5'8" in the hole and then went high, low, big, and I'm like, oh, they've solved this. And my assistant would say, coach, let's remember our rule. We're gonna stay until they score 3. And then they never go back to it. You know what I mean? It's just a fictitious way that it happened during the game and not necessarily a plan. You know what I mean? We're all guilty of that. Forever I was we're going to play man, we're going to guard, we're going to do this, and I tell you, I wish I would have not been so hard-headed my whole career, because I think I could have been a better coach down the road if I would have been a little bit more open to doing some different things, because it allowed us to beat some teams that we probably had no business beating. But there is a part to it that, jack of all trades and master of none. There's two sides to that.
That's
story.
a hard line, and that's a good point. If some of these coaches come to your mind of they do everything, and maybe some of them do everything really, really well. I think that's hard to do. I do take more of the approach of we're going to be simple, and we're going to try to be really excellent at those simple things. And there are going to be games where it doesn't work, right? So people ask, what if they're bigger, faster, stronger, and you're 5 out? And we might lose. There's a really good chance that we might be able, if teams don't help off of us when we drive and they're content staying one-on-one and they can win all of those matchups, I don't know, because we don't really screen. It's all about player movement, ball movement, creating gaps and attacking and kicking. When that domino begins, moving it and reattacking again. But if they never have to help, and we can't just score over them one-on-one, so that's possible. But I do think that fine line of here's what we hang our hat on, but here are some adjustments that we can make. I think maybe that's the goal, or not the goal. That's the sweet spot right there, where you're not from game to game completely different identities, but you're not what I've done, which is this is what we do no matter what. Oh, we got our head beat in. Sorry, that's what we do, and there's no adjustment. And I feel bad for some of the teams that I've put through that.
We're all guilty of the definition of insanity, right? doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Uh, we all do that to some extent because as coaches, we have what we feel comfortable with.
Yep.
And I think part of the challenge as a coach is to kind of get out of that comfort zone, learn some new things, understand that you could, there's coaches that win that are very demanding, very hard charging, very, I don't want, maybe coach out of fear, maybe is the word,
Yeah.
that are really successful. But there's also coaches that are on the opposite end of that are really successful. So, I think number one, you got to be yourself. You can't be fake. If you're a serious person, you got to be a serious person. You can't go out there and try to be funny all of a sudden. The thing I had to really kind of watch myself was I'm extremely sarcastic. So I would have a tendency to
that sword can work or it can cut deep.
Yes. And you gotta be careful with that sword. And I have to constantly remind myself that, okay, wait a second, that could possibly hurt. Let's hold that. That's not what I need to say. Those kind of things. But I think the good ones understand that. The good coaches understand that, your words, your tools, and how you use them are really, really important. They can break a team down, but they can also build that team up. And how are you going to use those? We're all really good coaches when things are good. when we got really good players, really good team, we're all really good coaches. But I will tell you from my experience, some of the hardest years coaching were when we were really, really good. One of our academy teams, we had back-to-back seasons where we went 31-4, and then the next year we went 36-2. And everybody looks at that and they say, "Man, you must have really great." We did. We had good players, but that was hard years because a lot of times in those situations, you've got good players that in any other year might get more playing time, but you're really good, and you're really successful. When you're not 36-2, sometimes it's easier to play number 11 and number 12.
Yep.
You know what I mean? It may be a bit easier for you because you're playing a different style. But, if you're playing like us in South Lincoln, we're playing, more of a possession game. We're playing 8 kids, 9 kids. And if you're really good, number 10, number 11, number 12, they're not getting on the floor a whole lot. How are you going to sell that to your program? How are you going to sell that to your kids? So finding other ways to make sure that you're including your team and showing them there are other ways to help us achieve that excellence, whether it be, great bench players, whether it be, we would constantly look at film on our bench to see how our bench is responding.
Yeah.
How did this player, when he got taken out of the game, how did he react? Did he go pout, or did he go get, dapped up, or what, how did that happen? And how did the team respond to it? So I think there's, as coaches, we've got to be able to coach. I think some of the best years, for me speaking, some of the best years I coached were some of my 500 years, where we went 500. And people think, man, they weren't very good. You don't understand. I did it, and we didn't have that talent. We willed our way to 500. You know what I mean? Because those kids believed in what we were doing, and we beat a lot of teams that we probably didn't have any business beating. And the only reason we did is because, we outworked them, and we believed in what we were doing.
Man, those years that you overachieve, those are the ones that are really special. Yeah, so like my wall back here, these are the 11 since I've been here, and I got this from Leslie Broadhurst. He had 35 of them, Coach, on the wall behind him, and I was like, well, I'll start with my 9 or at the time, and but add to it. But yeah, when you look over, when you think back, it is those teams that overachieve that you're really fond of, and they might not be the most popular teams in people's memory of great teams that you've had. So I think a good goal for us is to help our team to overachieve if they're not that talented or as talented as you've had, or like you said, better or different than anybody in your district. But then when you do have talent, to help them to gas out, like Stan Bonowitz says at Concordia, gas out and to reach their potential. That still doesn't mean that you win state. That doesn't mean anything, but they know they gave their very, very best. I think the challenge with that, with the more talented teams, is limiting or controlling expectations. Because when you're in the fall and you're looking around like, golly, we got a lot of talent. Like, look at us compared to our district and in the state. Like, I think we line up. Like, when you've had that feeling, you feel it, the players feel it, and then early on in the year, you're already looking pretty good. Those expectations of what we should do or could do, I think that's where things start to creep in, where either you take your foot off the gas with your effort and your preparation because you think it's already kind of a done deal, we're better, or jealousy starts to set in because guys start to really look inward on what they're getting in the team instead of keeping focused on what we could achieve as a group. I think peaking too early in the season is a real thing for super talented teams. So those coaches that start the year with the expectations of you guys should win state and they actually do it, that's incredible to me because those coaches did a heck of a job.
Yeah, 100%. And we were lucky enough to have a few of those type teams, especially when we were at Little River Academy where we had those back-to-back seasons. One year I think in district we averaged 85 and gave up 35,
Wow.
But it's like you said, we went, I think we're in a district of, I can't remember, maybe there was only 6 in our district. So there was only 10 district games. The problem with that is your top kids don't get the minutes they need for the playoffs because no longer are they playing just 2/3 of the game. Now they're playing the whole game. And it hurt us that first year. We ended up getting beaten in the regional tournament. And the next year, that same group came back, less a few players. And to be honest with you, even though we were 36-2, we did a better job of scheduling. Like our only loss prior to losing to Crum in the state championship game was to Austin LBJ in the championship of the Lake Travis tournament, which, we were 2A. Nobody liked us being there to begin with, but we won it the year before. So they kind of had to invite us back. And we beat LBJ the year before in the championship game. So we, getting kids to understand that, we're really good right now, but this is not the end. This is not where we want to be. To get where we want to be, we're going to have to be able to beat teams that are as good as us. And, your district plays a lot into that, as you know. I mean, if you're playing and rolling through district and you're not getting much competition, sometimes you got to turn that practice in. I've been notorious for being our biggest adversary. You know what I mean? In other words, I had to create conflict in practice because we were not creating conflict in games. It was walkthrough. You know what I mean?
Wow.
We were having more competition in practice than we were in games. That's not where you want to be. But if you're coaching that group of kids, how are you gonna create that conflict so that we can handle it down the road? And it's not the first time that all of a sudden this kid's playing with 4 fouls. You know what I mean? He hadn't done it in 10 games. And now he's got to learn how to play when he's in foul trouble, or you're playing without a starter or whatever it may be. Because you haven't had to the whole season because you rode through district really, really easily.
Chris Ryburn at Midland Christian said that with scheduling, you got to make sure that your best teams that you play aren't in district or in playoffs. Like you need to
Yeah.
play the best teams that you could play before that. And so that you know what it's like to play that level, to maybe even get beat by that level of play, but you get better there, and then you go through. So I've always thought about that with scheduling and the art of that, making sure that we're gaining confidence, but not becoming overconfident because of how easy the schedule, whatever that is. But having a couple games in there that push you, that seems to be pretty important. And then you mentioned it too of really what you're talking about is keeping them in the moment and keeping them focused on the process. Easier said than done. We have shirts that say the focus on the process. That's a cliche that a lot of people throw out, and it's kind of like what you said. People say it, but then when they come to practice, is that really what's happening? I think one of our biggest jobs is keeping them focused on being present. And one of my favorite parts from The Last Dance was when they were talking about Jordan. He's on the bus and he's got these headphones on and he's listening to music. And they said one of his unique attributes was the ability to be completely all in and present with what he was doing in that moment, and then the level of focus he had. And with all the distractions that our players have and all the things, if there are expectations for what could happen down the road, or the opposite, maybe there's fear of what's coming in your district. Because there's some districts out there that are just insane with how many good teams. And you're like, golly, can we even make it? Don't worry about those things. Focus on right now, getting better today, want to know. I think that's a big part of our job.
Yeah. Next drill. You know what I mean? You have that next drill mentality, or next play mentality, to where if I've got to do the next play, and not focus on what's already happened or what's happening out here. Focus right here on this next play. Let's make this next play. We got turned on to him when I was at Southlake, a guy named Brian Kane. I don't know if you've heard of Brian Kane.
Mm-mm.
Research him a little bit. He's really into the mental game.
How do you spell the last name?
Cain, Kane. Probably more so with the baseball type guys, but he does a lot of professional type guys and stuff. But really, I kind of started really kind of getting into that side of the game, because I think that's an important thing that we as coaches don't do a good job. We do a pretty good job of physically preparing our kids, but how do we teach them to play the next play? To flush it, as he says, and move to the next play. I think it's important to study that as a coach and make sure that we understand there is a mental part to this game. Some kids are really good at it. Some kids need some training on how to understand that if I play poorly tonight, that doesn't make me a bad person. You know what I mean? And not have that performance association to what kind of person I am. I think when kids can understand that it frees them up to be able to be the best player that they can be. But I think that's an area that if I were getting back into it, I'd really focus a little more on. I mean, I did a pretty good job of it probably my last 5 or 6 years. But I think it's an area that I think you can make a lot of strides if you're really working on that mental side of the game.
Can we go through the speed round? This will take 2 minutes, and then I'll get you off.
Yeah,
all right.
Absolutely.
Favorite ice cream flavor?
Butter pecan.
Greatest shooter of all time?
That I coached, or just greatest shooter?
All time. Nah, all time. Anybody.
I'm going to go with Steve Nash or one of those guys.
Yeah, I like that.
Old school.
Top 3 dinner guests you'd like to have from any time period?
Top 3 dinner guests. I'm kind of a history guy, so I'm probably going to go with a little more historic type figures.
Yeah.
I really would like to, some of our early presidents, George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, those kind of people probably would interest me more than most people. So let's go with George Washington, I'm not really that interested in having dinner with most of the professional athletes. uh, I think it would be hysterical to have dinner with Shaq. I actually got to coach against Shaq a little bit my
Nice.
first year of coaching, and I wasn't the head coach; I was an assistant coach, and we played him in the playoffs. But
How many did you hold
I
him
think
to?
well, this was his junior year, and they beat us, and then crazy story, they beat us, and well, I'm trying to think which year it was because we didn't play him one year, we did the other. Oh yeah, his junior year, and then he played Danny Henderson at Liberty Hill in the regional finals, and Danny beat him.
Oh, wow.
That was his junior year, and then they went 3A their senior year.
Okay.
Moved up classifications, and they won it all his senior year.
So you have George Washington, Shaq, and who else at your dinner?
Let's go. Man, if I could pick anybody, Mike Krzyzewski. I'm a big Coach K coach.
For a high school shot clock or no shot clock?
4. As a former Princeton guy, I'm 4.
Nice. What book would you give someone?
Make the Big Time Where You Are by Frosty Western.
Love it, Coach. It's
simple, simple, easy to understand, but man, some powerful lessons there.
Yes, sir. Last one. For in basketball as a player, who's the GOAT?
Jordan.
Nice.
Yeah.
Coach, I want to thank you so much for giving up your time talking hoops. We went for over an hour, almost hour and a half. It was just such a pleasure to get to have this time with you. Really appreciate it.
Hey, I appreciate the opportunity. I hope somebody can get one thing out of it.
There's no doubt, Coach, for sure.
Yep. Thanks, Matt.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the JAMODI podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.